Have you ever wondered why it's so hard for you to let go of the things that aren't serving you? In this video, I'm going to talk about exactly why that is and what you can do about it. So over the past, 5-6 days here when I've been doing these morning activations, there's a recurring theme that keeps coming up in my mind when I go to talk about it or when I'm reading or when I'm taking notes or have my own study time. And one of those things is patterns. The patterns that we show up in our daily life, right? And as you've probably experienced, and I know that I've experienced in my life, is that sometimes we can clearly see that what we're doing is not serving us. Last night I was listening to the American Glutton podcast, and I don't really listen to that like religiously or anything, but every once in a while I'll just scroll through my podcasts or any of my inputs. So backtrack. I have these list of inputs that I allow into my mind at certain points. And whenever I think I need to go grab an input, those are either coming from podcasts or they're coming from books, or sometimes, very rarely, they'll come from like movies or TV shows. But usually I try to stay away from those because I want to get into a longer arc conversation that is going to allow my brain to explore curiously. Anyway, I was listening to that. And if you didn't listen to the podcast, it's by Ethan Suplee. Ethan Suplee was from Remember the Titans. He's the big guy in there and all kinds of other stuff. I think My Name is Earl is probably a show. There was some other stuff. Anyway, he went through a massive transformation and weight loss and mostly just building muscle, and like he's really fit now. It's just kind of wild to see the transformation, but it happened over years, like decades. And in the episode, he was talking about the ups and downs of that, of when he would go, when he would lose weight and he would lose like 300 pounds and then he would gain it all back again. And in the episode, he was talking about there were all these things that I could do. I knew that I could lose weight. I knew that I could do this, but I couldn't keep it off. And the reason why is because there was an internal thing that I hadn't dealt with yet. That was really the reason why. Like the weight and everything else was just a symptom. And when I heard him talking about that, it made me think of the patterns that I have in my life and why they're there. And then it also made me think of the definition of ego that I heard this week from a guy named, his name's Nick, but he's a jiu-jitsu podcast and the YouTube channel. And he described and defined ego as the stories that we tell about ourselves. When you have something that you believe is true about yourself and you keep reinforcing that with patterns and habits, it becomes so true to you that to abandon that thing is to abandon yourself at a core level. And that is why it is difficult to let go of the things that don't serve you, because on some level they are serving you. They are serving and supporting the story of who you are. The reason you have a hard time letting go of things that don't serve you is because they do serve you. And because your ego is just the stories that you tell about yourself. When those stories are threatened, it's literally a threat to your very self, your identity, your core. The answer to this is, if you want the transformation, if you want the dream, if you want the life that you've been dreaming of and that you want, and that all the things that you say you want and you write down in your journal that you want, and you tell people that you're going to do and all this stuff, if you want all those things, the real answer is to have the courage to rewrite those stories that are holding up yourself. It is not easy. It is difficult to do. It is very difficult to do that. And a lot of times, I mean, honestly, it might require some like deep therapy work to get into those old wounds and dust off those places that you haven't been to. And that can feel scary. If you want to do this work of rewriting, it involves a few things. It may involve you working with a professional to help, deal with some old trauma and stuff like that. But there's also all of this stuff that comes into us all the time. I've talked about it on the show before, but it's data. Everything that comes into us, I call data. There's a old Hawaiian Ho'oponopono teacher who called it data as well. But all these things come into us at all times, right? And so we can only process a very, very small fraction of those things. The rest of them settle inside of us and start to dictate how we show up in the world. Without your permission, right? It just becomes this thing that you're operating on in the background, and you may or may not want that. And so we have to work to rewrite some of those things. So the way it works, the way it starts is, first of all, you realizing that you can actually shift and do something different, that the reason you're not is because of an underlying belief system that is supporting who you are. It's not supporting what you want to be or where you want to go, but it's supporting who you are right now and the stories that have brought you here. So in order to let go of those things, we have to rewrite the stories, yes, but we have to first clear out the things that are in the way. And so one of my favorite ways to do this is using Ho'oponopono. And I do clearings in my Facebook group every week, and I've been telling you guys about that. But how those clearings work is that we first identify a feeling that's coming up. So like, let's say that you want to start a podcast, and you feel scared that like nobody's going to listen to it. Okay, that's an absolutely absurd thing. It doesn't matter anyway, but well, it's neither here nor there. So what we would do is we would start out with that feeling because it's coming up, because it's, again, conflicting with the stories that are holding up your entire self, right? So that's why that feeling is coming up. It's a signal that there's a story here that you're holding on to. And so it's not serving us, so we want to let it go. But that's okay. We don't want to like fiercely let it go. A lot of people talk about like, we gotta kill your old self. No, that's not what this is about. This is about gracefully letting go of who you've been in exchange for who you are and who you want to be, right? So we want to thank that feeling for coming up in a certain way. And I like to do tapping. So I'll tap right here on the beefy karate chop point here. And I'll say, even though I'm feeling afraid, I deeply love, accept, and forgive myself. Even though I'm feeling afraid, I deeply love, accept, and forgive myself. Even though I'm feeling afraid, I deeply love, accept, and forgive myself. So this is just one process here. So then you would tap on the other points, which is in between the eyebrows, on the outside of the eyes, kind of like your temple area, but closer to the eye. And then underneath the eyes, you would tap on that. And then underneath the nose, you tap right there with just 2 fingers. And then underneath the bottom lip, you would tap right there. And then on the collarbone, tap. And then meet back at the top of the hand where you're tapping on that fleshy part in between your thumb and your index finger. And the whole while you're doing that, you should think and keep that feeling of fear and feeling of being afraid fresh in your mind. And the reason why you want to do that is so that you can help it move through, right? Too many times we ignore these things that come up because we think, oh, whatever, like I'm just going to like power through. But bro, powering through is what got you here. Powering through is what's keeping you stuck, right? So we have to acknowledge that these stories and these patterns and these beliefs, they are real things that we may or may not be aware of. We may not even know exactly what the story is. That's okay. We can take the signals that our body sends us and our mind sends us, called feelings, and run with those things to help move through the block, right? And the point of this is that if we do that and on a consistent basis, it can start to cue your mind that you want something different, right? A lot of times I think it's just as simple as that, of like, hey, this is a thing that I've done in the past. Now I'm doing something different. And that's what I've talked about patterns before as well. Like the more I stop myself going down a certain path and stop myself on a certain habit or a certain pattern, the more I cue my mind and those well-grooved patterns in my mind, the more I cue it that I want something else. I want something different. It's not going to happen immediately because it's something that's been going on in the background forever. That's exactly why, Ethan Suplee was talking about how he went on these weight loss journeys and then would lose all this weight and then would go right back. It's because there was an underlying story that was putting him back into this thermostat level. So if the thermostat in here is set to like 67 right now, because it's early in the morning and people are still asleep, we like to keep it cold in here. If it goes above that, the air is going to kick on and keep it right back into 67, right? And if you had it where it was set to both, that would, if it would drop below that, it would also like turn the heat on and kick it back up here. Ours is not doing that today, but you get my point. Like the thermostat setting of your mind is going to kick on whenever you start to change, because it's like, oh, wait a second, this is not where we want to be. The more you cue your mind to say, I want something different, the more you will be primed to actually rewrite that story. And so it's a combination of clearing, that this is an acute practice that you can do with the tapping to clear out the things that are in the way based on the cues, the signals that your body and mind is sending. Because listen, if I say, I want to, like, I remember, I'll tell you a story. One time I jumped off a 30-foot cliff, and I remember standing on the edge of that cliff looking down and saying, holy crap, there's no way I'm doing this. This is crazy. Like, this is so high. And there was this person next to me. It was a young kid. I'll never forget it, man. They were just sitting there chilling. They probably jumped 100 times. And this kid looks at me and she says, hey, you're overthinking it. You're just scared. Just jump. And I was like, you're right. I mean, that feeling was so acute, and it was because what I was about to do, my body and my mind were like, this is not safe. You should not do this. And so I had this insane feeling come up, fear, that was literally stopping me from going forward. Now, eventually I jumped off the cliff, and it was crazy. And, like when you jump from that high, like your arms are flapping, and you're like trying to fly and stuff. But I hit the water, and I surfaced back up, and I was good to go. I mean, it hurt a little bit, but it's a far drop, so I climbed back up and it was all good. I did not do it again, though. That was a lot. But the point is, my body sent the signal of fear to stop me from doing something unsafe, right? Because it didn't have all the information. This is the same way that your brain acts for everything. If you are used to a certain habit path and a certain pattern path, your brain takes that as the cue that this is what you want in life, and we're going to continue to do this thing. And if we stray from that, that's going to bring up some feelings, right? And so if you're trying to do something, you're trying to create something that matters, you're trying to make a contribution, but you keep getting stuck, this is why. And so we have to rewrite those things and have the courage to do so, because it's not going to be comfortable at the beginning. But the good news is you can do it. So if you want help with this, if you want to walk through a clearing with me, I'm actually doing one tomorrow. Well, it's Tuesday. I do them on Wednesdays in my group for free. So you can go to chriscree.com/flow and join that group right there. If you're a creative, I highly, highly recommend that you do this, because again, this is the key to becoming the person you want to be, to clearing out these old stories and rewriting them. It starts with being able to pay attention to those signals that are coming up so that you can train your brain to refocus and go the direction that you want to go, not the direction that is keeping you where you are, keeping you stuck and not living the life you want. But that's it, guys. I love you all. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Chris Cree. This has been the Wake Up, Get Better podcast, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. See ya.